Did. First thing we're going to do is sketch out our site. This is the site that we're going to do. It's going to have a nav. It's going to have the big picture. It's going to have a section. It's going to have a place for a video or slideshow. It's going to have a footer. So it's basically going to look like this. Here, let me get rid of the grid. It's going to look like that. Okay, so let's begin. If you wanted to make a grid like this for yourself, you could go to the Moose Tools and
Chris Store, please call 8957.
down.
Chris Store 8957.
Okay, Chris. The Grid Wizard. What this will allow you to do is it will allow you to say how many columns you want. So let's say we do it at 10, and we will make it 1,000 pixels wide. It'll calculate the size of these. Each one of these is 100, therefore two of them will be 200, and this is where you have 10 columns at 1,000. Or you can click this again and you can turn it to 960, which is what I did, and 12 columns, and it'll create that grid for you. Just a tidbit. Just by clicking that you can make the changes. And then when you print it, it's not going to be proportional, but at least it'll figure out the math for you. So that's what I did over here. I created my grid. So now I know that each square is 80 pixels. So in order to open this up in Photoshop, I would create a new file. I would make it 960 by some multiple that you see here. It could be 560, 640, this doesn't matter. And then I create my file, and then by holding command quotation I get my grids. Now if your grids aren't matching up, all you have to do is do command R. If you don't see your ruler, double click your ruler, go down to guides and grids, and you can change the grid to every 80 pixels or whatever your grid will call for. Subdivisions 1, and then you have your grid. Okay, so that's that. And so we created this grid with the client, nav, header graphic, section, some kind of sidebar, and footer. Let's go get our graphic. I have a few graphics just to save time. If you go to Moose Loose, and down here, the very last the little graphic square down here, if you click that, it'll open up all these pictures that you can use. Okay, I'm going to do tomatoes. So all I have to do is right click in Firefox, and I can save image as. And so I'm going to save it. I'm going to go to my desktop and create a new folder, which is going to be my root, and I'm going to call it demo. That's right, demo. So I'm going to create my root folder, and I'm going to save my header, HEADER .jpeg, in my root folder. That's a good place to start. So if I wanted to know the size of this graphic, I can do view image info, and it will tell me that this graphic is 1280 by 600. Okay, just so that you know that. So I saved it in my root folder, and so if I go to my Finder in my desktop, I should see my demo, and inside my demo is my header. Okay, now let's create our beautiful page. I went to Dreamweaver, and I'm going to open up a new file. Okay, it'll be a HTML, and I'm going to create this, and it's going to put all 5 sections of my website right here. So here's my HTML, here's where my head is, here's my title, my head closes, and my body, and everything that I do is going to be inside the body because that's what people are going to see. Okay, so I'm going to save this right now before I do anything else. I'm going to save it inside my beautiful root folder called demo, and I'm going to call it working HTML. And you know why that is, because later we'll be creating our index HTML from the template, so that the template will be associated or the index will be associated with the template. Okay, here we go. And here is our working. It is in the root folder along with the header graphic. Now, what we should do before we do anything else, we should set up the Dreamweaver brain or site management. And what we're going to do is go to Site, New Site, and I can name this project. It can have spaces and special characters. Demo site, I'm going to call it. And then I go and I pick where that folder is. Okay, so I highlight it, I hit choose, and when I hit save, look, when I go to files up here, I can see a drop down of all the sites that I've done. Okay, so I can see that I'm now on the demo site, and sure enough, in the brain, I can see my header graphic and my working. From now on, Dreamweaver is going to keep track of all these files. So if I were to change the name of this header, all the files that have header, the header JPEG will actually be updated. Okay, let's begin. Let's look at our grid. Okay, the first thing we need, of course, is a container. So let's create our container. I'm going to go to Insert, Div. I'm going to call it Container. And since I didn't create a container rule, here's my new rule, new CSS rule. Now, you can see that it already filled it in, but look down here. This document only. You would pick that if you wanted your CSS to be embedded. But we don't want it to be embedded. We want it to have an external style sheet. So I'm going to pick New Style Sheet File. And when I hit OK, it's going to ask me to name this style sheet. So I'm going to call it Style. Style.css. And I'm going to make sure that it's in the root folder with my other two files. Okay, so now it's ready to create my style CSS. So what we're going to do is we'll probably put a background color. We'll get rid of this. I just want you to see it. We'll just colorize them for design purposes. Or maybe I'm just going to leave it brown. I'm going to leave it this really light brown. When I hit OK, how do I hit OK? I want to click off of that. I'm going to go to block. I'm going to make this 960, and just for design purposes we'll do 640 like we made our grid in Photoshop. Now to center it, we have to click on not the same for all, and we're going to center it by going right auto and left auto. So we have our width, our height, and our auto. Good. And so when I hit OK, the first time it writes the CSS. And look, it already created that style CSS. The second time we do it, it writes the HTML right there. So look, there it is. All the rules that we created are going to be in the style CSS, and our source code is ready to go. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save all. That would, because what happened is it updated the working HTML, and it also updated the style CSS. So if I just saved, it would just save one. So I'm going to save all. And then I will view in the browser, see if we have a wonderful container already. And there it is. So we know that this has the background. It's 960 by 640, and so we're doing good. Now because I mess this up all the time, I'm going to get rid of this content for container goes here, and I'm just going to hit return until that closing div is like, I don't know, right now it's on line 48, because everything that I do from now on is going to be between this, they will be between this, and they'll be above that. So I'm going to make sure that I don't get that goofed up. Alright, so let's look at our beautiful grid. Let's make our first nested div, and that'll be for the nav. So I'm just going to put my cursor, making sure my cursor is where I want it to be. If I accidentally left my cursor up here and I hit insert a div, guess what? It's going to insert it up here. So I'm going to make sure that my cursor is blinking in the container. So I'm going to insert the div. I'm going to call this nav and AV. There's a reason for that we'll get into later. Did I create a nav yet? Nope. So I'm going to go to new CSS rule and look what happened. Dreamweaver is still expecting it to be embedded. So be careful. The first time you do it, it's going to ask you if you want it in this document only. But we want it on our new style CSS. And so I'm going to hit OK. And let's put a background on it just so that we can see it. We'll take all the colors out, maybe if... Okay, and then for box, we don't really need to put a height in because our nav bar is going to push it down, but we're going to do it anyway. We'll put it, I don't know, 30 pixels. And we don't really need to put a width on because by default it's 100%, but I'm going to do it anyway because when we see the rules it'll be easy to see. Okay, there's box. Let's see, background color, box. Good. We don't have to put margin on because it's not. There's no room to center. It's going to be automatically centered, and we'll hit OK. And OK. First time it wrote the CSS. There it is, right there. Second time we hit OK, it writes the HTML. So I'm going to save all because it updated my source code and the style CSS. I'm going to hit save all. And I'm going to preview in Firefox. And there it is. So there's my nav. So let's go back. And let's go underneath the nav. And see, looky, I can put all kinds of white space in here because it just doesn't care about white space. Now I'm going to insert my div for my header. Going to create a new rule, and looky, now it knows it's going to go into the style CSS. So I'm going to hit OK. And for the background, we don't need anything there. For the box, it's 100%, but we're going to put 96 anyway. It don't matter. 960, I mean, but it really doesn't need to be there. All right, and I'm going to hit OK. And OK. So it wrote the CSS. There it is, header with 960, source, and there's a header right there. So at this point, we're going to delete this, and we're going to insert our image right away. So I'm going to go over to my frames here. Now I don't see image. Oh, here it is. Here's image. On some versions it's under common, other versions it's under media, so you might have to poke around and see if you can find your images. So I'm going to put my cursor where I want my image. I'm going to go to image. It's going to open up my file manager. I'm going to pick the header, the tomatoes. Yep. And then I'm going to hit open. And it puts it in. Now this is going to be way too big. If I save and view in a browser, holy macro, look how much farther out it goes. So I can easily put, let's see, let's see if 100% works. And if that's the case, we can get rid of the height. So let's see if that works. 100% works. Okay, so now we have our beautiful, beautiful image in place for our header. So after that, we could put an alt tab in there, we'll just, and look, if you put the cursor here, you can put it on down here. These are my welcome tomatoes. However it is about that. All right, and then if I click on another box, tomatoes. There. Tomatoes, that doesn't look right. Oh, it doesn't matter if it looks right. All right, now I'm going to go and look at my beautiful grid. Okay, I got my nav, I got my header. I'm going to do my section. So I'm going to make sure I'm not goofing it up by adding a few spaces. Make sure my cursor is in the right place. I'm going to do section. Section, I didn't create the new rule yet, so I'm going to do that. Style, CSS, cool. And then I'm going to put a background color in just so that you can see what's going on. I'll make it sort of yellowish. Ugh. Okay, and then my box. This is where I look at my grid. And my section is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 8 squares is 640 pixels. So I'm going to put 640 pixels. Height, I'm not going to put anything because I'm going to be putting content in, and I don't know how high my content's going to be. Okay, now this is where I got to do my float left, but somebody suggested that we can do padding at this point, so we'll put 10 pixels padding. Now, as you know, that when you add 10 pixels padding, it adds another 20 pixels to the width, so we got to take off 20 pixels on the width. Okay, so in other words, when we added the padding, it's going to put 10 pixels on each side of the section, and that would make it too wide to fit in the 960 container, so we got to take off some of the width. I know, it's goofy. And when I hit OK, it writes the CSS. Second time, it writes the HTML. So, let's see. Yep, there it is, look. There it is, padding, left 620. All right, so good. If I save all now, and I view in the browser, we can see that we have our nav, our picture, and now our section. Okay, going back to our grid, we always consult our grid. Here's our little video, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4 video div. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is 320. So let's go and make our next div. We're going to insert our div. We're going to call it video, or we could call it anything we want. But this time we're going to put a video in there. We didn't create a rule for a video, so let's do that right now. Make sure it's in style CSS. Cool. We'll put a little background in it, just so we can take a look-see here. I think I'm doing too many reds. Okay, right there. And then for our box, we'll make it 320. And we'll also float this left. Oops, but maybe we should put some padding in. So let's put 10 pixels. If we put 10 pixels in here, we have to take away 20 pixels from the width. Just like this. And then everything else is great. And hit OK, it writes the CSS. Hit OK, it writes the HTML. And if we save all and go take a look at it in the browser, I'm going to refresh. There. So everything is falling into place. Now the only thing we have left is the footer. So let's look at our beautiful grid. Okay, here's the footer. We can see that it's 960, and we could put whatever height we want, because a lot of times clients will put contact information, copyright policies, and things like that in the footer. So we don't really want to dictate to our clients how much space. And so let's go ahead and create our footer, our last div that we have to worry about. Notice that all of this is between the opening container up here and a closing container way down here. That way everything is nested inside, that one div. All right, here we go. Div. I'm going to insert a div. I'm going to call it footer. New CSS rule. Make sure it's in the style CSS. And for the background, I'm just going to make it, I don't know. I'm probably going to keep it this color, and it's going to go along with my my graphic. There we go. Maybe that great brown there. Okay. And for box, just I think I'm going to put 100 pixels. We can take that down. We might even want to put a width, you know, even though that's by default 100%. But at this point, because we have these floats, the next one has to clear those floats, and so where are we? Okay. All right. It looks like, ooh man, I might be goofing up this. All right, here we go. So we want to do float, or not float, clear both. That'll take that float off. Okay. And so here we go. Okay, right says CSS. Okay, writes the HTML. Now look how simple that code is. Look how very, very simple that code is. You know, I'll even make it simpler. So we can see the header starts here and ends there. Just by putting on another line, doesn't that become a lot more clear? And if I want it to be super clear, I could give myself even some more white space. Okay, so if I save all, and I view it in the browser, there's my footer. All right. So now I can take out the colors if I wanted to. I could take the heights out of the container. Yeah, let's take the height out of the container right there. So I'm going to go back. Now there's different ways you could do that. You could put the cursor at the very end, after the closing of the opening tag, and then if you go to your properties and hit CSS, you can hit Edit Rule. And this box comes up, and I can take the height out this way. Of course, this isn't how I do it. I just go to the CSS, the style CSS. So looky, now you go to the container, and it doesn't have that height. So I'm going to save all. I'm going to view in the browser, and there it is. Now we don't have it overextending. I think I'm going to take the color out of my section and my video div. So looky, I could do the same thing. I could go down, and here's my section. If I put the cursor right at the closing of the beginning tag, I could go edit this rule, and I can just delete everything in here, I think. There we go. And if I hit OK, it takes it. Let's see if it did. Yep, see, looky, it took the color out of the section. Or I could just go Style CSS and delete the color. Same thing. That's how I do it. It's a lot easier for me. So if I save it all, and I look at my beautiful site, and there it is. I kind of like that brownish background. I think I'm going to keep it. It's beautiful. Okay, now I'm going to do my nav bar. So if you go to the mouse tool that I gave you, you can go to line 30. It's the CSS menu wizard RGB. I'm going to open that up, and here is the composer. We're going to keep the classic menu, but you don't have to. You could do something. If I did moose, that's fine. You'll see that it will write all the code with my branding. So if I was to call this specs, it's going to create all my code, all my class with my branding. So that's kind of a good way to put your signature on all the code that you do. Now here's something that only works if your graphic is online. I'm going to grab my tomatoes right here. I'm going to grab my tomatoes, and I'm going to drag it up to that window. And look, if I drag it here, guess what happens? I can see, by hitting that checkbox, I can see my tomatoes. And because of that, I can now create my buttons to go along with my tomato theme. Ooh, oh boy, am I good or what? Okay, so that's that, and we see how it's going. and maybe I might do this green here. It's sort of like a yellowish green. Yeah, there's hardly any blue in it. Okay, so there's my green. Oh, isn't that beautiful? Yeah. Yeah, good job. All right, and then I'm going to maybe do that brown. What's it need? A little bit more of this. More of that. Yeah. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Okay, so I got my little brown, and then I might do the tomato again. So I can see 173. If I need to match it exactly, I can type them in. 73, 44, and 0. See, this is the way my button bar is going to look like. That's pretty good. It goes really good with my tomatoes. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my button B HTML. Oh no, I got to create my buttons first. So I'm going to go to my button composer. At this point I can turn off my tomatoes. I'm going to go to my button composer, and I'll do home and about us and tomatoes, and then we'll do I don't know. I guess I don't know enough. Species of tomatoes, and how about in salads and recipes. Ooh, I can't. I don't know. And uses for tomatoes. Okay, and we can have a shop where we could sell seeds, garden tools, and then we want to be able to they want to have contact, okay, and things like that. So now we can see how my button bar is going to lay out. This is button A, we're going to use button B, but you can see that the drop downs are already there. So it created all the code. I'm going to get button B HTML. Look, and it highlights everything. When you click that, it highlights. All you have to do is Command C. It'll copy those. I'm going to look very carefully here. I'm going to look for my nav. Here's my nav. So contact for nav goes here. I'm going to get rid of that. Paste in my beautiful button bar. Then I have to go and get just the styles. I'm going to click, and you don't even have to look. It selected all the CSS. When you click that button, I'm going to do a Command C. I'm going to paste it in my style CSS right at the bottom. Like that. Beautiful. I'm going to save all. I'm going to look at my beautiful web page to see how it looks. And it's looking, what's wrong here? This up here. Oh, it's because I put a height in my nav bar. So I'm going to go and take the height out of my nav bar. You know, sometimes you put stuff in just as you're designing it to see if colors are matching, but you see immediately when something is wrong. So I'm going to hit save all. Kind of scared me there. And now look at that. It's a beautiful website. Thank you. I really like playing with drop down. All right. So here we go. We have our beautiful site. Now we're gonna put some dummy text in here. We're gonna put some dummy text in our section just so that we can see how it's laid out. So I'm gonna go to Mooseloose, and I'm gonna go to miscellaneous and dummy text, and I'm gonna put my name, and I'm gonna even spell it right, and I'm gonna call this tomatoes. So what it does is it creates your dummy text, but it also customizes it. So if you're doing this on your regular site, you're telling the person who's reviewing your site that you know, that this is the page, and it tells when it was created. And so once we do that, we can grab the bottom part, see, because the bottom part already has the styles in. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to find my section right here. I'm going to give myself some space, paste it in, save it, and let's see how this looks. See, so it's really turning into a really nice page. Okay, so I'm going to pause a little bit, and then when we get back, we're going to turn this into a template and create the entire site.